So as was expected, the GOP, Grand Old Party, now better known as GOP, Gaslighting Only Party, removed Liz Cheney from her leadership position in the House of Representatives, and they did it in a fashion characteristically cowardly and nakedly political as usual, since they didn't even bother to take a vote, instead choosing a so-called voice vote, where everyone shouts and then the ayes have it, which is a great way to avoid putting each person on the record for future reference, and instead claim falsely and unfairly that it was a unanimous decision, which it wasn't, and that the party is now united, which it is not. Now, since Liz Cheney has chosen the path of truth, I am definitely on her side on this one, and besides, being practical, I seldom have any problem following the adage that says, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So that's that, no problem. Liz Cheney good, Gaslighting Only Party bad. However, I needed late-night comedian Seth Meyers to remind me that my stance is purely practical and convenient, but in no way reflects my overall sense of this woman. As Seth stated quite succinctly, she had no qualms when her father's administration used torture after invading a country, ostensibly to defend America from terrorists that were really in a different country. So, given that her sweet father arranged for Halliburton, his old company, to get the one and only no-bid contract to manage affairs in Iraq, well, that smells pretty conveniently crooked to me, don't you think? Then, after Obama came into power, she wouldn't forcefully reject the birtherism that Trump was trying to paint Obama with, and instead would engage in subtle racism through the back door by saying she couldn't understand how this new and unusual president was the first ever in failing to defend America's interests abroad. Then she stood by Trump during the Access Hollywood bus grab him by the pee incident, even while saying Hillary's emails were the bigger concern. And once the Orange Menace became president, she didn't have much negative to say about the panoply of crazy, stupid, and paranoid actions he undertook, culminating in the Ukraine extortion, for which he was most rightfully impeached, but from which he was acquitted by Liz. So, all due respect to her, but even though she's against Trump, and even though it took an insurrection and a coup to get her there, and that much I'll gladly accept, I would have a really hard time ever backing her on anything else. But let's talk astrology, and on that, first and foremost, Liz is a Leo. And what do Leos love to do? Gamble. They love to place a bet. And I think that aside from being relatively more honest than the former president, which isn't very hard, is it? Since he's the very definition of a pathological liar and a career criminal, I think Liz is placing a bet that she will ultimately emerge triumphant in this game of chicken. And you know what? I like this bet. I think she has an excellent chance of winning. This year, her early Leo degrees are getting the Saturn treatment by opposition, so it isn't unusual to find yourself behind the 8 ball. But a year from now, in May of 2022, Jupiter enters Aries and then proceeds to station pretty close to a trine to her Sun-Mercury conjunction in July. That foretells that a year from now, the astro situation is infinitely more favorable, and given that it will then only be a few months from voting, very timely indeed. At election time, Jupiter will have retrograded back to late Pisces, but once a planet has made an entry into any set of degrees, it continues to radiate energy from there as well. So to my understanding, she goes into the 2022 midterms in a very strong position. I should also note that her Jupiter at birth is very nicely positioned in the sign of its exaltation, Cancer, next to Mars, which is quite a solid, strong position, sextile Pluto-Uranus, very nice, trine Neptune, and even trine Saturn by sign. In other words, a Jupiter that will almost always bring you good news. So, despite my previously stated misgivings, I'm still betting on Liz on this one, and I think there's a much better than even chance that she's going to be politically fine and will likely have the last laugh on this whole affair.